So now we come to this very complicated weekend, this difficult and challenging weekend that sort of begins with Maundy Thursday, moves into Good Friday, a very solemn and difficult day, and then the sort of space of Holy Saturday into the celebration of the resurrection. I really think there's some interesting things to think about in terms of identification and identity in these days. You know, as we sort of enter into Good Friday, one of the central parts of Good Friday is the recognition that in his act on the cross, Jesus identifies with us, and particularly he identifies with our sin. Paul says in 2 Corinthians chapter 5 that for our sake he made him to be sin who knew no sin, so that in him we might become the righteousness of God. In the cross, Jesus fundamentally identifies with our deepest problem and issue, which is our own brokenness and sinfulness. You know, and it is, as Peter writes, it is in his body that he bears our sin on the tree. And this is a very profound identification with us and our condition on Good Friday. And it's devastating. It's a devastating day. But, then comes Easter. And on Easter, while he identifies with us on Good Friday, on Easter, he enters into the fullness of his own identity. My dear friend, Pastor Keisha from Chicago, talks about this really beautifully, that, you know, even in the resurrection, Jesus takes on the fullness of his identity. Jesus doesn't just do resurrection, Jesus is the resurrection and the life. He says that to Mary and to Martha, I am the resurrection and the life. And in that, he takes his identity as the resurrection and is raised to new life. It is glorious. It is, you know, death has no dominion over him. That because his identity is, who he is resurrection and life. And that's incredibly important. That's at the heart of the celebration of Easter, is that he is the resurrection and the life. And I think that's really helpful. Those two things, the identification of our own sin and our own difficulties and our sufferings and the pain that is in the world because of sin, and the identity of the resurrection is really important for us. I think it is very easy for us to become too identified with our sin and sometimes our pain and our loss and our trauma. It can obsess us. We can be obsessed by it. There can be too much focus upon our brokenness without understanding the fullness of the power of what's in the resurrection. And in the resurrection, while he identifies with us on Good Friday in our sinfulness, he takes us up into his resurrection on Easter Sunday. And what that means for us, today in this season, is that my identity is not first in my sin or in my trauma or in my difficulty or in my brokenness. My identity, because of the resurrection, is in that resurrection, is in Christ Jesus, who is the resurrection and the life. Easter is about both Jesus and Christians living into resurrection identity. This is who we are because of him. So as we walk into these days, which are difficult and sad and challenging, we walk into them in the resurrection identity of Jesus, being taken up into that for this moment and forever. And for that, we give thanks and praise.